As the drama between Kirk Frost and Kendra Rasheeda continues to unfold, tension is at an all-time high. With Kendra startling everyone by admitting that she spent the night with Kirk and that the foul-out occurred immediately after, what started as a rumor is now developing into a full-fledged altercation. People are wondering if Kendra is speaking the truth. Rasheeda, as the news is catching on like wildfire, Kirk's wife is furious and doesn't think Kendra is telling the truth. She is convinced that Kendra is merely trying to cause trouble. As word gets out, though, further queries begin to surface, such as if Kendra's claims are true. Was Kirk really capable of the worst kind of betrayal of Rasheeda? The stakes are bigger than ever as the scenario is set to explode up. The drama is only beginning, and the next development could drastically change how this bizarre story unfolds. With social media blazing, secrets emerging, and emotions running high, the only concerns are who is speaking the truth and how will Rasheeda respond to the shocking disclosures. Watch closely to see how this bizarre tale develops. And don't sitting in the living room with her phone in hand, Rasheeda tried to take in the sudden reality. Her entire world was rocked by Kendra's message accusing Kirk of betraying her. Kirk has been lying to you. I stayed with him overnight. She continued thinking about those words, and every time she heard them, her anxiousness increased, anger and incredulity. How could this have occurred? How could the signs have gone unnoticed? She believed in their life together and had always trusted Kirk, but now it felt like everything was falling apart. Kendra's charges were no longer merely hearsay. They were being disseminated among their closest friends on social media and in the media. It had been weeks since Kirk had become distant. Rasheeda silently maintained a knowing doubt that she had witnessed the truth, even though at first she didn't think Kendra, who had a history of stirring up trouble, could possibly be telling the truth. Rasheeda had no idea that her husband, with whom she had spent so much time creating a life, would now be at the center of a crisis that she was ill-equipped to handle. She never imagined it would come to this, especially with someone like Kendra. Rasheeda, but Kirk had been distant and evasive, dodging her calls at night and giving nonsensical excuses. Her thoughts were interrupted as her phone buzzed once more. It was Kirk calling, but she was unable to answer since she wasn't sure what to say or what he could say to make her. Her whole world seemed to have shifted beneath her feet, and she no longer knew which way was up. After a few unsuccessful calls, she got a text message that said, "Please, Rasheeda, it's not what you think, we need to talk." It was a simple, almost pathetic plea. After delivering that last message, he attempted to call again, but Rasheeda put the phone down since she was so enraged and unsure of how to approach him. Because of the fact that Kendra had shared, her message felt like the deepest kind of betrayal. What had brought them here? Everything they had worked so hard to create together, including their professions and family, was now in jeopardy because of one night that Kirk had spent with Kendra. Rasheeda felt as though her faith in her spouse, Kirk, was eroding. She was upset not only by the affair, but also by the betrayal of all they had valued over the years. She had focused her life on Kirk and their aspirations, and now it appeared as though he had ruined them all in one night, casting doubt on trust and their time together. Although it was hard to believe, the evidence was undeniable. As Rasha sat there, everything seemed to point to the discussions Kendra claimed to have had with Kirk and their undeniable link. In the quiet of her house, she felt ashamed of Kirk's actions as well as the reality that everyone was now watching her every move. Was this how things were going to work out, with one thoughtless decision taking away all she had sacrificed and worked so hard to achieve? She wondered if she would ever be able to forgive him as her thoughts whirled through the alternatives. Rasheeda knew she couldn't just sit there and do nothing, even though it hurt. Was this the last straw? Or should she try to patch up their marriage? What would her kids think? Was she able to raise them in a household where trust was no longer assumed? It seemed to get worse with each thought she had. The hours that followed were a blur of calls, texts, and efforts to assist her. Kirk received support from friends, family, and even some of his co-workers, but nothing they said could make the grief of what had transpired any less intense. After Kirk's treachery was made apparent, everyone realized there was no going back. Social media was ablaze with reactions, though, with some people defending Kurt, some supporting Rasheeda, and yet others questioning Kendra's motives. Supporters on both sides fiercely defended their stances in the divisive public response. Although everyone had differing ideas about what Kendra's genuine goals were, what Kirk should do next, and what Rasheeda should do next, in the middle of the turmoil, Rasheeda didn't know what to believe anymore and felt more alone than ever. Kendra was supposed to perform her part in the spectacle that the world had created out of her charges. Rasheeda, however, needed answers and needed to face Kirk and hear the truth from him, no matter how painful it was. She wasn't interested in the drama or playing with her emotions, but Kirk wasn't ready to admit that there was a problem. The whole truth. Rasheeda finally answered his phone a few hours later. Although Kirk's words were full of excuses and his voice was tremulous, Rasheeda didn't care for his explanations. She needed to hear the complete truth, no more secrets, no more falsehoods. The first thing Kirk said was, "I'm sorry, Rasheeda. I should have informed you long ago that it was a mistake, a horrible mistake, and that I never intended to cause you any harm. I didn't want you to learn this way." Rasheeda didn't want to hear it now because the conversation was using up every word of his apology, and it appeared like he was attempting to protect himself rather than accept responsibility for his mistakes. Rasheeda needed to know what had happened and how far things had progressed, so she couldn't help herself, despite the fact that it was ripping her apart. But Rasheeda felt the distance between them grow even further as Kirk started talking about his remorse, guilt, and self-loathing because he wasn't the man she had thought him to be. She had been in love with him for a long time. Therefore, she still wanted to save what they had, and giving up everything they had built together seemed unachievable. But the truth was that their love had evolved, and there was no going back. However, Kirk didn't seem ready to deal with the consequences of his actions. He kept pleading for forgiveness and offering every possible justification. But Rasheeda had heard it all, and nothing appeared to change the situation. And she had no idea what was ahead, and the trust had been betrayed. All she knew was that she would have to make her own decisions for the first time in a long time, and it was her only option, no matter how hard it was. The conflict between Kendra and Rasheeda had evolved into one for self-respect, healing, and for Rasheeda, the days following the shocking disclosure appeared to go on forever. Although Kendra's charges had shocked her, the truth of what she had to cope with was now beginning to set in. Kirk's treachery was no longer a personal matter. It was now a public event, and external pressure was Rasheeda felt as though she was drowning in expectations, inquiries, and opinions, yet she was unable to respond to her phone's continual buzzing. She had begun receiving unsolicited advice from friends, family, and even total strangers on social media, some of whom were asking her to forgive Kirk. Every time Rasheeda heard Kirk's phone calls, which were replete with apologies and entreaties for forgiveness, she couldn't bring herself to respond. Although everyone had an opinion, no one could relate to the suffering she was going through or the years of love, trust, and dedication she had invested in their relationship, only to see it fail because of Kirk's careless errors. Her anger flared again at what he said. She was furious that she had given him everything and that he had publicly humiliated her for it. She kept asking herself, "How could he do this to me?" She was furious, but she was unable to let go of the life they had built together and the memories they had shared. Even though she knew in her heart that things would never be the same, Kirk's lies were worse than the affair. The fact that all she had worked for could be so quickly destroyed was something she didn't want to confront. His avoidance of the truth and the way he had managed the issue to protect himself made everything feel like a lie. Even though Rasheeda had spent so many years believing in him in them, he had lied to her face so many times that they had become a web of lies that were hard to break. Rasheeda was unable to avoid Kendra since she was the focal point of everything. The lady who had been a tiny part of their lives had suddenly become the symbol of betrayal. Kendra's involvement in all of this merely fueled the flames. Rasheeda had previously ignored her, considering her to be a simple presence in their world. One thing was clear. Kendra wasn't finished, even though Rasheeda couldn't figure it out and, to be honest, didn't want to. The more Rasheeda thought about it, the more Contra appeared to be an uncontrollable force, as seen by the charges she made and the video she uploaded, which showed a woman who wasn't willing to back down. What was it she desired? Was there more going on here, or was this just retaliation? Rasheeda sat in her living room, knowing that anything further Kendra disclosed would just exacerbate the situation. She looked at her phone again, and when she saw another message from Kirk, she groaned and closed her eyes as she leaned back. She had been attempting to ignore the incessant reminder of everything that was happening, but she was unable to do so. Neither the truth nor her reality could be avoided. Rasheeda realized she couldn't keep avoiding this problem. She had to choose between facing the truth head-on or continuing to deny it and pretend nothing was wrong. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the confrontation, but she wanted answers, so she couldn't keep avoiding it forever. It was quiet in the city when Rasheeda drove to the restaurant where they had decided to meet the next evening. She parked and walked into the dimly lit streets. Kirk was already there, looking as if he hadn't slept for days, seated at a table in the corner. He glanced up as she approached, and Rasheeda's expression gave him a moment of relief. He stood up gently and whispered, "Rasheeda," as she took a seat across from him. "Thank you," for Rasheeda decided to meet with him and said, "I just want to talk." To explain everything, looking at him with intense interest. "Explain?" she asked, not sure whether she could handle any more explanations. Kirk's face fell. He looked like a man who had been through a lot, but Rasheeda wasn't sure she felt any sympathy for him anymore. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice shaking. "There's nothing more to say, Kirk," she said, because she had already heard enough of them. "You've already made your decisions. I just want to know why, Kendra. Why? Now? I didn't want it to happen, so stop Rasheeda from interrupting him. You made a decision, and now we have to live with it." His eyes were full of regret, but Rasheeda wasn't interested in his regrets because she had heard it all before. "I've spent years being annoyed, and Kendra just pushed me into it." "I gave you everything, Kirk," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "And you've ruined it. You've ruined me. What are you expecting me to accomplish? How am I meant to simply let this go?" Kirk reached out to touch her hand, but Rasheeda pulled it back, saying she wasn't prepared for his touch after everything. "I'm sorry, Please, I never meant to hurt you," she repeated in a tearful voice. "Rasheeda, you are loved." Rasheeda had always believed in their love, but now it felt like a broken illusion, and she wasn't sure if she could rebuild it or even if she wanted to. "Give me a chance to prove it," she said, staring at him for a long time while the words weighed heavy on her tongue. The conversation ended with Kirk saying, "I don't know if I even know who you are anymore," in a broken voice. The two of them were silent for a while, and Rasheeda felt the weight of the decision she had to make. Not sure what the right one was, but knowing that this was about her and not just Kirk anymore, and she wasn't going to let him ruin her any more, not even if it meant losing herself. As she left the restaurant and returned to the cool night air, Rasheeda felt a sense of clarity that she couldn't quite place. Kirk begged her to think about their future and try to recreate what they had, but she knew that whatever it held couldn't be the same. The days that followed seemed to drag on forever, filled with uncertainty and emotional turmoil, the weight of everything. Kendra's accusations, Kirk's lies, and the public scrutiny seemed to hang over her like a threatening cloud, refusing to let go. For the first time, Rasheeda was not afraid to face the future. She would find a way to move forward, even if it meant doing so without Kirk. The world was watching her every move, waiting to see what decision she would make. Everyone had an opinion, but only she knew what was right, and despite the rush of emotions that surrounded her, it was becoming clear that Rasheeda needed to center herself after spending so much time with others. Her phone rang constantly, but she struggled to answer any of the calls, including one from Kirk apologizing for leaving, and she realized that she had lost sight of who she was and what she truly needed because she had prioritized the needs of others over her own. As she tried to regain some control, the constant reminders of her pain kept returning to her. She couldn't escape it. Wherever she went, someone was talking about what had happened, spreading rumors or adding fuel to the fire. She also received messages from friends, some of whom were supportive, others who were just interested in what was happening. It seemed like everyone had something to say about her life, her marriage, and every move she made on social media. Rasheeda knew she couldn't continue to live in this toxic environment and that she needed to take a step back, breathe, and gain some clarity. It was time for her to make decisions that were best for herself without taking into account how others would perceive them. Despite the fact that the public drama was wearing her down, she wasn't ready to show that weakness because she couldn't let herself collapse right now with so many people watching her. She decided to leave the house for a while because she was sick of being the victim and needed to get away from the place that had felt like home, but now felt like a constant reminder of everything that had gone wrong. No plans in mind, she packed a bag, got her car keys, and drove away into the night. All she needed was some. Rasheeda drove aimlessly, her mind racing with thoughts of Kirk, Kendra, and everything that had happened. And she didn't mind the silence, because it was the first time in days that she didn't feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her. The roads were quiet, and the headlights on her car pierced the darkness. But finally, she found herself at the beach, where she could hear the sound of the waves crashing against the shore was soothing. And as she stepped out of the car, the cool ocean breeze lifted her hair, and she closed her eyes to let the moment sink in. She had spent so many years trying to please others and maintain appearances. But now, in this quiet, peaceful moment, she realized how far she had drifted from herself. The weight on her chest seemed to lighten the salty air as she walked along. The shore and the rhythmic sound of the ocean reminded her that even in the midst of suffering, life could still be beautiful. She had lost touch with the strong, independent, and fearless woman she once was, and it was time to regain that aspect of herself. She deserved to start over, even though it wouldn't be easy or happen immediately. Later that night, when Rasheeda checked her phone, she discovered that Kirk had left her several messages. But for the first time, she didn't feel the need to read them because she had heard enough. What mattered now was what she was going to do and what she was going to do next. She had always been a talented businesswoman who had built an empire through her own hard work, but she had let it slip away while juggling the chaos of her personal life. So she decided it was time to prioritize her career because her identity had been so closely tied to her relationship with Kirk and her roles as a wife and mother for so long. The next day, Rasheeda went to. Returning to her workplace without Kirk at her side seemed strange, but she was determined to keep going, and for the first time in a long time, she began to put her all into her work, met with her staff, and discussed new initiatives. She had thought about it a lot, and although she wanted to give him another chance because she knew how much he meant to her and how much they had shared, the more she thought about the lies, the more she realized that the damage had already been done and that it would take time to rebuild trust. Of what to do about Kirk? Could she forgive him? And could she ever see him the same way again? She was unsure of what the next few months would hold, but she was confident that she would be okay because she had already built a life before Kirk, and she could start a new one now that she had overcome obstacles in the past. Rasha had a meeting with her lawyer the following week, and she knew it was time to start planning for her future, regardless of what happened with Kirk. Always emerge stronger. Rasheeda took a moment to review the documents that the lawyer had given her, and as the reality set in, she became aware that she was making choices that would change her life. But she also experienced a sudden sense of empowerment because she had taken the initiative and no longer needed to rely on other people's advice. Kendra was still making headlines, reminding everyone about the affair, and seemed determined to make Rasheeda's life as difficult as possible. But in the meantime, The drama continued. Rasheeda was learning to ignore the fuss, and Kendra could say whatever she wanted, but that didn't change the fact that Rasheeda was in control of her own life. She had always been strong and was learning to be strong again without Kirk, so she didn't need to prove anything to anyone or win Kirk's approval. So Rasheeda began focusing on her kids, her career, and her mental health. As the days went by, she grew increasingly confident in her decision to move forward, but she wasn't sure why, what lay ahead, but she was no longer afraid of it and was ready to go forward, no matter how it might seem. Although she had no idea what her next journey would involve, one thing was clear. Rasheeda was not going to let anyone dictate her life any longer. She was the one in charge now, and she was determined to. Though she wasn't sure where the path ahead would lead, Rasheeda's decision to take control of her life felt like a quiet metamorphosis. She wasn't just reacting to the chaos around her. Rather, she was taking action and determined to shape her future on her own terms. Kirk, on the other hand, seemed to be delving deeper and deeper into. There was still a part of her that felt the weight of their previous relationship, but Rasha's resolve grew stronger every time he tried to get in touch with her. No matter how many times he apologized, the damage had already been done. Her trust in him had been damaged, and this couldn't be fixed by just saying the right words. Although she couldn't fully disregard the happy memories, their shared past, and the family they had created together, she was aware that those moments wouldn't be enough to undo what he had done. The affair wasn't just a betrayal. It was a betrayal of everything they had promised one another, and that couldn't be forgotten. Nevertheless, Rasheeda wasn't going to sit and mope about the hurt. The knowledge that she could start over and reshape her life was a powerful one. Rasheeda threw herself into her work with renewed vigor, her passion for her businesses now acting as her escape, and she started organizing future projects, partnerships, and collaborations. As the weeks passed, she was determined to show them that she was more than Kirk's wife, even though she knew she needed to focus on her own development. This was not the first time she had been tested, and it certainly would not be the last, but she was determined not to let the outside world bring her down this time. After a while, Rasheeda began to feel stronger because she had already been through a lot. One afternoon, she found herself meeting with her lawyer again, and the divorce papers were on the table, ready to be reviewed. She hadn't made up her mind yet, but she was getting closer to it as she sat there examining the papers, and while leaving her marriage was a terrifying prospect, it seemed even worse to remain in a relationship built on lies. Rasheeda had come to the important realization that this wasn't just about leaving Kirk, but about moving on from the past. Each relationship had its ups and downs, but trust was the glue that held everything together, and she signed the papers. Steadily, even though she knew it was the hardest thing she had done in a long time. After realizing that she was making the right choice and that she was choosing herself, Rasheeda took a deep breath and felt the weight lifted off her shoulders. She wasn't sure what lay ahead, but for the first time in months, she felt free to be herself, rediscover who she was, and rebuild. I know things are messy right now, Rasheeda, but I want to be clear. I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm just telling the truth, and I didn't ask for this either, she said when her phone buzzed again as she was leaving the lawyer's office, and this time it was from Kendra, of all people. Rasheeda hesitated for a moment before opening the message after taking a deep breath. Rasheeda put the phone down, her anger slowly waning, and decided against responding immediately because she felt like she wanted to lash out at Kendra for everything she had triggered in a harsh message, but she knew it wouldn't help the situation. Kendra had already made her decision, and Rasheeda had to make her own. It wasn't about her anymore. She could not change the past, but she could control the next weeks. She had come to terms with all that had happened and refused to let anyone else to define her. Went by in a rush of bustle, and Rasheeda kept her focus on her work, but she additionally started scheduling time for herself to relax, think, and ignite her passions. She had made her life and didn't need approval from others to move forward, autonomously, and she now planned to reconstruct it, but alone this time. Kirk continued to mail because he was still attempting to salvage their relationship on his own terms, letters apologizing and asking for forgiveness. But Rasheeda had already. She had given him everything, and now she knew that no amount of apology could repair the harm. Rasheeda thought it was time to look after herself and called Kirk after, making up her choice. This time, she said, "I'm done," without hesitation, simply, "This is no longer possible." Kirk attempted to persuade her to reconsider, but Rasheeda had already concluded that her self-doubt had been excessive. This time, she was taking charge of her happiness and refusing to let him dictate it. For the first time in a long time, Rasheeda felt at peace, and as the days passed, she began to feel. Although she was uncertain of what lay ahead, she felt for the first time in months that she was at peace. The storm was over, but Rasheeda will always carry the scars. Since she had recovered her life and felt she could handle whatever came next, no one could take it away from her. Rasheeda's journey has been a whole emotional roller coaster, filled with betrayal and heartbreak and ultimately self-discovery. In the face of inconceivable challenges she bravely decided to move forward, and her strength, tenacity, and commitment to beginning anew are proof that, despite how dire things may seem, there is always room for improvement. The question is,